Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into something extraordinary. It's a single immigration case, but it's stretched over 13 years. Think about that.
Right.
Multiple appeals, setbacks, and findings that honestly look like a dead end legally. So our mission today is kind of like legal archaeology. We've got the documents, years of them, and we want to pinpoint how this case got flipped. How do you take a decade of no and turn it into a yes? We're really focusing on the strategy here, specifically the work of the respondent's attorney Randy Alexander.
It's a fascinating case study in resilience, really. The core is an application for special rule cancellation of removal under NACARA Section 203. Now, NACARA itself, it aimed to help certain groups from Central America who came during specific conflict periods. But this case, it was anything but straightforward. You've got Rand's appeals all the way to the Ninth Circuit and these huge hurdles, credibility issues and what's called the persecutor bar, really tough stuff.
That sounds like walking a legal tightrope over a canyon. So we're going to trace how attorney Randy Alexander navigated all that, guiding the defense to a final grant on September 5th, 2025, 13 years later. Okay, let's get into it. Where do we even start with a timeline that long?
Well, to really grasp the win, you need to see the journey. It was quite the gauntlet. It actually started okay back in 2012, an initial favorable decision.
Okay, so far so good.
But, DHS appealed immediately.
And that's where the trouble really began, I take it.
That's the turning point. In 2016, the Board of Immigration Appeals, the BIA, they reversed that initial win, and they dropped the bombshell finding. The respondent was barred from relief, period.
Barred based on what?
The persecutor bar. It was linked to his past mandatory military service in El Salvador.
Okay, Han, the persecutor bar. Can you just explain for everyone listening, why is that specific bar such a huge deal?
Right. It's a really significant barrier in immigration law. It basically says if you're found to have participated in persecuting others, ordered it, assisted, anything like that, you're ineligible for most humanitarian relief. Asylum, cancellation of removal, it pretty much shuts the door.
So it's not just a setback, it's like a legal dead end.
Essentially, yes. A statutory exclusion. And it gets worse.
How so?
In 2019, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, that's a major federal court, they agreed with the BIA about the persecutor bar.
Wow. So the higher court backed it up.
They did. They sent the case back down, but they highlighted that the respondent hadn't proven he wasn't a persecutor.
So when a circuit court says that, how do you even fight that? Doesn't that finding become almost set in stone?
It creates a massive uphill battle. It's incredibly hard to overcome. The BIA did remand again in 2020, but the focus was technically on credibility and other eligibility points. Still, that persecutor finding loomed over everything.
You can just feel the weight of that, years with this hanging over him.
Exactly. And that's the challenge attorney Randy Alexander faced. Not just arguing the case, but overturning findings that seemed locked in.
Okay, this is where it gets really critical. How did attorney Randy Alexander start chipping away at this? Starting with credibility, right?
Yes, that was the first mountain to climb. On remand, the court had to look again at whether the respondent was telling the truth. His credibility was shaky because of past statements, particularly about his military service. Did he fight? Did he handle detainees? Did he fire his weapon? The stories didn't quite line up over time.
And DHS jumped on those inconsistencies, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. They pointed to specific examples, things said in asylum interviews years ago versus later testimony. Like in one early interview, he might have said yes to combat, yes to handling detainees. Later on, testimony might have been, no, I didn't do those things.
Yeah, that looks bad on paper. A really tough hole to dig out of.
Definitely. So attorney Randy Alexander's strategy at the final hearing in March 2025 wasn't about denying the inconsistencies outright.
Okay. So what was the approach?
It was about providing a believable reason why they existed, giving context.
What was the context then? What made the difference?
The respondent testified, guided by attorney Randy Alexander, that his prior lawyer had given him bad advice. Basically told him to say too much, maybe embellish or just over-disclose to the asylum officer way back when, leading to those inaccurate statements about combat.
That's bold. Blaming previous counsel, does that usually work?
It's risky, but it can if the explanation is genuine and the current testimony rings true. And crucially, the respondent testified he only understood the seriousness of those old statements and the need to correct them. When he was going over everything, all the documents, with his current attorney, Randy Alexander, preparing for that 2025 hearing.
So linking the correction directly to the current careful preparation with attorney Randy Alexander.
Precisely. It framed the correction not as a convenient lie now, but as finally setting the record straight with proper guidance.
And the court accepted that explanation.
It did. That's a key finding in the decision. The court found him credible because it was reasonable for him to follow attorney Randy Alexander's advice to clarify the record. They found his testimony at that hearing was consistent with being truthful.
That's huge. That finding basically saved the case right there, didn't it?
It was the absolute linchpin. Alexander managed to reframe the narrative. It wasn't this person lied. It was this person made understandable errors based on bad advice and is now correcting it.
Incredible. So credibility restored. But that still leaves the massive hurdle. The persecutor bar, affirmed by the Ninth Circuit.
Right. Step 1 cleared, but step 2 was arguably even harder. The burden was immense. He had to prove it was more likely than not that he hadn't ordered, incited, assisted, or otherwise participated in persecution.
Even though the BIA and Ninth Circuit had leaned heavily on his unit's bad record. The battalion cazadores, you said.
Exactly. The previous rulings basically presumed guilt by association because that unit did have a documented history of human rights abuses.
So attorney Randy Alexander had to somehow separate him from the unit's actions. How did he do that? What were the facts?
He focused entirely on the individual's specific role and actions, or lack thereof. First, evidence showed the respondent was just a low-level soldier. Rank and file, no authority, no one under his command, couldn't order anyone to do anything.
Okay, that counters the ordered part of the bar.
Right. Second, and this was really compelling, attorney Randy Alexander presented evidence that the respondent himself had actually been arrested and interrogated by his own unit.
Wait, his own unit arrested him?
Yes, and then released him.
That completely changes the picture. If the unit doing the persecuting also targeted him, he doesn't sound like part of the inner circle, does he?
Exactly. It strongly suggested he wasn't purposefully involved in their abusive activities. He wasn't integral to the persecutory machinery, so the court ultimately agreed. They found his actions didn't go beyond just being a member of the unit. It wasn't personal involvement or purposeful assistance in persecution, which is the standard needed to overcome that bar, especially after the Ninth Circuit's involvement.
Just amazing. To overturn a statutory bar that had been upheld on appeal, that's a major legal victory.
It really is. It cleared the biggest obstacle, the one that had plagued the case for, well, nearly a decade.
So the path was finally clear for the ultimate decision on the NACARA application itself.
Correct. With credibility okayed and the persecutor bar dismantled, they moved to the final requirements. And those were straightforward here. He was Salvadoran, entered the U.S. before 1990, showed good moral character, 7 years continuous presence. He met the basic NACARA criteria.
But meeting the criteria isn't always enough, right? There's still discretion. The judge has to decide if he deserves the relief.
Exactly. It's the final stage. Does granting relief make sense in this specific case?
So how did attorney Randy Alexander argue for that favorable discretion?
He really emphasized the positives, the equities. The respondent had lived in the U.S. for over 30 years at this point. Strong family ties, a spouse, a U.S. citizen child, a parent here. He owned property, ran a business, deep roots. And even though there was a past DUI, attorney Randy Alexander showed documented proof of rehabilitation, compliance with court orders, demonstrating that good moral character element.
And I bet that explanation for the testimony inconsistencies came back here too.
It absolutely did. The court explicitly mentioned that the explanation blaming prior counsel's bad advice and correcting it with attorney Randy Alexander was reasonable and persuasive. It showed sincerity, which weighs heavily in discretionary decisions. It tied the whole strategy together beautifully.
It's like the credibility win wasn't just technical. It bolstered the human case for discretion too.
Precisely. It showed character.
Yeah.
So the final order came down September 5th, 2025. Application granted.
13 years.
What?
Wow.
A long, complex fight finally won. It really shows that even deeply entrenched adverse findings can be overcome.
So reflecting on this whole journey, what's the big takeaway?
I think it highlights the sheer complexity of immigration law, especially these older relief acts like NACARA combined with serious bars. And it underscores how critical superior legal strategy is. Attorney Randy Alexander didn't just argue the facts, he strategically reframed them. Overcoming that persecutor bar post-Ninth Circuit, fixing the credibility issue after years, That required deep legal skill and persistence.
Yeah, that ability of attorney Randy Alexander to meticulously unpack and recontextualize years of tangled testimony to overturn established findings, it just screams how much difference quality, dedicated legal representation makes. It literally took a case that looked like a certain loss for years and turned it into a win.
Preparation, strategy, and understanding how to present the narrative.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, our listeners. Consider this. If one focused legal conversation, one instance of getting the right advice, like the respondent got from attorney Randy Alexander, if that can fundamentally shift the understanding of a decade's worth of perceived facts about someone's truthfulness, what assumptions might you be making based on incomplete information you encounter every day? How often is that crucial, clarifying context missing when you form an opinion or assess a situation? Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.